Today I'm going to talk about this pen. Bill sent me this pen and he said it's kind of like the Pilot Plumix, and it is, and I thought these were the same pens, but they were not. In a future video I'll do a shootout between the two. The Plumix I have is a demonstrator, so it's clear, and it has a sort of a bulge there. So it's not exactly the same pen. The two look alike. These are fairly inexpensive pens, made to be ergonomic in some way. I'll come back to that, but you have a very typical grip section. They're fairly long and tapered, making them look a little bit like desk pens or old-style dip pens. I think this is a pretty fascinating pen. Thanks, Bill, for sending this to me. I'll talk about the parts of the pen. I'll tell you what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and I'll do a writing sample. Let's start with the cap. Like the Plumix, this one has a very peculiar cap. It's very small. This looks like a rocket with those strange red things. They don't actually. First, I thought you'd actually compress those to pull the cap off or something. No, it doesn't do anything. It's just hard plastic, and it's red on a black cap. It is a screw-on cap, which is somewhat odd with a pen like this, and it's really small. The most ridiculous thing is that you can actually post this as if that would add anything. But I mean, okay, they thought about it. It's possible if you want to do it. Great. My issue with that, no, I'll come back to that later. Let's first talk about the parts. Bill was kind enough to get me an extra fine nib. Of course, he knows how I hate fine nibs, so I got the strong feeling he did that on purpose, and that is just fine, because this is pretty much the only extra fine nib I own, and I had to try that out at some point. It is extra fine. It is Japanese, so in Western standards you might call this extra fine. I guess I would say this is needle point. Gives you a very fine hairline. Steel nib. A nice feed. Interesting thing about this nib and feed is that it's interchangeable with the Plumix, the Priora, the 78G. Yeah, 78G. So you can switch around. A bunch of these cheaper Pilot pens, you just throw around your nibs and feeds. And that's why it's nice. It is an extra fine nib, because I already have a broad, I have a medium, I have a fine. So Bill may just actually have thought about that quite a bit more than I gave him credit for. So very cool. Nice. We have the section. The section has this extremely odd shape. It's really like almost crescent shape there, I would say. That's the bottom end, so near and the underside of the feed. Then you have two facets there, which I'm sure you can see in the reflections. And together you just sort of put your middle finger under that in that crescent, and then you have your index finger and thumb to hold the pen. This is not for everyone, I'm sure. But I think it's actually pretty nice. As you can see, the pen is a very decent size. It's pleasant to use. It's really ergonomic. I like that. Unscrew the barrel. I'm just going to hold that up to the light. Now, I really think the barrel is completely closed off, so that gives us an interesting idea for an eyedropper. I could not do that with the Plumix, because that had a little hole in the back, and this seems like it's actually closed off. So I will try that and let you know with the shootout. This is a cartridge, came with the pen. You could also stick in a Pilot converter if you like. It doesn't come with the pen, and that's pretty much all there's to it. So, long barrel. Anything interesting to see there? Well, this is just all black plastic. You have 3 ribs there at the end of the barrel for those who care about that. The nib just says Pilot Super Quality Japan Extra Fine, and that's pretty much all there's to it. There's not a whole lot more detail. These pens look typical with those weird caps, little futuristic. Nothing wrong with that, I guess. It's a fascinating little pen. Okay, what do I like about it? What do I not like about it? Well, the grip, for me, the grip is nice. You know I have large hands. Even so, I think this is very comfortable to hold. The nib, well, it's extra fine. It gives quite a bit of feedback because of that. I think that was almost unavoidable. But it does perform. It does work well. One thing I don't really like, and I already mentioned that in my review of the Plumix, is that silly little cap. I mean, it's kind of odd. The problem is I grab a pen. I just usually grab it about this point and I uncap it. I take another pen, I grab it at that point, I uncap it. This is the way I uncap pens. I do the same with this pen, and I end up with a barrel and a section in my hand, because that is not the way you uncap it. You uncap it by holding it all the way up there and pulling off, actually twisting off that cap. So for me, that's not ideal. Just a minor gripe, maybe it's not an issue for you, I'm not sure. Try it out. Inexpensive pens, funny pens. The medium nib on this is fairly italic, which is nice if you like to do calligraphy. So funny pens to fool around with. I think the best thing I can do is show you a writing sample. So Bill, thanks again. It's nice that you sent me this as a Christmas gift. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye. Okay, let's have a look at the freaking Pilot Penmanship. Pilot. Oh! Doesn't it right? In extra fine. How I love extra fine nibs. You know, I never talk about broad nibs, always about fine. But then I would be lying. The ink is just a proprietary Pilot cartridge that came with the pen. And I've just squeezed some ink into the feed. Oh, listen to the sound. And then listen to this sound. That's the difference. But in all honesty, the pen, I'm not sure whether this is actually scratchy. Because it's extra fine, it's likely to give you feedback. Not a lot of tipping material at the tips of the nib. It does what it's supposed to do. It's supposed to be extra fine. It's a Japanese nib. Usually those are a size smaller when compared to Western nibs. So extra fine in Japan would be extra fine in the West. I can tell you one thing. This is fine. So, bit of writing. Really fine lines. Fast writing. Well, the thing keeps up. I mean, the nib doesn't skip. There's no oddities, so the feed keeps up well with the pace of the writing. There's quite some ink on the feed, by the way, because I just squeezed some in there. That's interesting. What about flex? Well, this being an extra fine nib, I think the flex looks extra pronounced, which is kind of nice. That for me, that's a redeeming quality in such a fine nib, that you really notice the added flexibility. It's not a flexible nib at all. It's steel and it doesn't really give, but at least with some pressure it opens up a little, gives you a nicer, wider line, and that contrasts well with the regular writing. So that's cool. What about wetness? Well, this pen doesn't strike me as being particularly wet. Now, you see that? That's not an even patch of ink. If you compare that to something like this is the Platinum Desk Pen, which also has a very fine nib, but you see the ink is much more saturated, and the patch of ink is much more even. No white bits in between it. Now, of course, this might well be the ink. As I said, this is a proprietary cartridge. Maybe it just does this. It's a little dry ink, I don't know. I've never used that ink. So I'll try that out, maybe with a converter or something, and I'm going to do a shootout between this pen and the Plumix, obviously, and I'll try to put converters in both and use the same wet ink, and then we'll see. You have to wait for the bit for that. The end. I hope this was useful, and I'll see you later. Bye bye.